Welcome back to Stranded in the Paint. My name's Nick Hedrick, and we are excited to be back once again talking about all things college basketball. And I know we usually talk about Pittsburgh things, and now you have my word, we will be hitting on Duquesne, Robert Morris, and Pitt in due time. But today we have the exciting opportunity to talk with David Jablonski, a Dayton beat writer. Dayton's won 5 of their last 6. 2 huge games against VCU, who's currently second in the A-10 on their schedule, including one this Friday. That's going to be a very exciting game. I highly encourage you to check that one out. David was kind enough to break down that game for us, talk about Dayton's win over over Davidson, earlier in the week, and then what this team might be able to accomplish here in the A-10 as the regular season is now officially in the home stretch, about 8 games remaining. So we're going to kick it over to that right now, and then I'm going to wrap it up. A little bit of a shorter one here today, but that's all right because we got this very insightful interview for all of you, and then hopefully next week, a few of us here from the Stranded Sports offices are going to be able to get together and break down the world of college basketball on a broader scale with another interview to go along with that as well. But for now, here is David Jablonski. I am joined right now by David Jablonski of the Dayton Daily News. David, for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. So, big game against Davidson the other night. Maybe not the prettiest game that we've ever watched, but nonetheless, the Flyers were able to pull out the victory. How big was that win to keep their momentum going? Winners of 5 out of their last 6 now is Dayton. How important was that win before they head to VCU here?
Dayton has a very slim margin for error the rest of the way after the 4 early losses, including that 3-game losing streak. So if they want a top 4 seed, they've got to finish strong. Very slim chance of winning that regular season championship the way George Mason is playing with a 3-game lead with 8 games to play. But Dayton's at-large hopes are what all the fans care about. And again, very slim margin for error there. I think if they win the rest of their games, they'll be in good shape. Maybe even can afford 1 loss. Seems like 23 wins, 24 wins is the magic number when Dayton goes to the tournament. But that's a tough task at this point with already 4 conference losses and 8 to go. And there's some tough games ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I believe they play VCU twice still. I think they end the regular season against them as well. Yeah. But going back to the Davidson matchup, they led pretty much the entire game from the first bucket where they gave up that 3. They kind of pulled out a little ways, and then somehow Davidson would come back. But then there was the bucket where Davidson went back ahead, but then there's a weird technical foul. What was the energy like there? Because it was a huge momentum shift. It was going back and forth. And what was that like when that call actually came forward? Because there was some confusion there too.
There was a lot of nervous energy. Dayton had led the entire second half, but not by a lot. Neither team could hit a shot all night from 3-point range. So it was a slim lead all the way until the end. But then suddenly Dayton's offense got all out of whack, and Davidson went on an 8-0 run, took the lead in the last minute. And right after they took the lead, Dayton called a timeout. And that's when the player from Davidson said something. I don't know exactly what he said, but he was crossing paths with Nate Santos, and he said something. The ref caught it, gave him a technical foul, and nobody could believe it. It was very poor timing for Davidson and great timing for Dayton, which really needed some help at that point. So they got the 2 free throws to tie it, got the ball out of bounds, and scored within 2 seconds on an out-of-bounds play with a 3-point play and took the lead. And that was the ball game with some free throws down the end to clinch it.
Yeah, that and one play was huge, obviously, goes without being said, but you could tell the pendulum had swung kind of firmly in their favor at that point. You wrote in your article about the game that Coach Grant, live and in time, didn't even get an explanation, much like everyone else who was kind of confused. Dayton's coach didn't either.
No, he just was hurt. Just heard it was a technical foul, but the officials, when they went to the scores table, our columnist Tom Archdeacon saw it. He gave a little yapping thing, so there was some yapping going on. And the Davidson player, if you watch the replay, actually apologized to the official before the free throw. So he knew he had said something inappropriate, but still everybody was surprised they called that foul at that moment.
Yeah, they mentioned that on the broadcast. They said it seems like he did a nice little, "Oh, crap, I might have just put us in a bad spot there," and he kinda went over immediately and tried to do some damage control, but, the damage was already done. So, we've kinda talked about what Dayton needs to do going forward. As I mentioned earlier, they've won 5 of their last 6. What do you think this team's doing so well right now?
Well, in general, they've shot the three when they're playing well, they're shooting the three-pointer well. They've been really inconsistent. I mean, their number for the season is well above average and well enough, good enough to win a lot of games, but it's often been under 20%. It's often been over 40%, sometimes in the middle. But when they can hit those threes, they're gonna be doing fine. They hit enough against St. Louis, high 30s in that game to win on the road last week. So that was a good road win against the St. Louis team that just beaten VCU. And
Mhm.
VCU didn't hit anything, I think, in the St. Louis game from three-point range. That's a big reason they lost that game. So we'll see what happens tomorrow night. Dayton's defense in general has not been good enough this season. That's the reason they've struggled in A-10 play. You look at VCU, they're got the number 1 offense in the league and the number 2 defense, and Dayton's defense has not been able to keep up. Having said that, tomorrow night, anything goes. VCU has more often than not had Dayton's number, but Dayton came back from 17 to win against VCU at the arena last season on senior night. So we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure. And, we kind of mentioned those 3-point struggles, and that's kind of been their bread and butter this year. How important do you think it was for Dayton to kind of pull out a rather ugly, uncharacteristic win before playing a team such as the caliber of ECU?
They've had a few of those. Very rarely have the victories been that pretty. They really dominated Duquesne on the road and Duquesne had been playing really well at that time. We're up 30 at some points in that game. But we really see that across college basketball. There's no rhyme and reason to these scores sometimes. I mean, whether it's a top 25 team or a team like Dayton, trying to competing in the A10, it's almost the results are almost random sometimes. You just don't know, and only the very best teams are able to stay consistent. The Auburns of the world, but even a team like Iowa State, which was playing so well early in the season, has lost a couple in a row now. It's just really hard to predict. I think to win down the stretch, Dayton needs to stay healthy. They didn't have Malachi Smith the other day. They certainly missed him against Davidson. I would think he'll be back tomorrow. He just had an illness, but we'll see.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. So we've kind of talked about the caliber of these two teams so far. Dayton 4th in the A10, VCU 2nd behind George Mason, who you mentioned. You mentioned in an article, I believe, a couple days ago, how they're kind of taking it day by day. Excuse me. How big is this game in particular, though, to kind of set the tempo for? I believe they have 8 games left. So during that stretch, how big is this performance for them?
Well, they keep those slim at-large hopes alive if they can beat VCU, and it would be a good win at home. They keep their A10 hopes alive to a certain extent. I still don't think they're going to come back and get George Mason. But, even more important, VCU has been the only team better than Dayton in the A10 since VCU joined the A10 in the 2012-13 season. VCU has more NCAA tournament appearances, 8-6, and that's giving Dayton credit for 2020. More A10 wins. They're first in the A10 during that stretch, and Dayton is second in A10 wins. More A10 tournament championships than Dayton, which hasn't won a tournament championship since 2003. So in the pecking order, it's VCU and Dayton in the A10. And, Dayton fans do not like that. They need to catch up. VCU has won 3 of the last 4 at the arena. So, just beating VCU is big on any night.
Yeah, and so we talked about kind of a little bit here on a few different occasions, the 6 for 26 night from 3 for Dayton. Say those shooting struggles carry over. Can they win with that same kind of formula they used to defeat Davidson against VCU?
They've won a few games without shooting well, so they've got the ability to do that, but they're going to need to play better on defense too. They can't let VCU go off, and VCU has been playing really well. They won their last 2 games by a combined, I forget how many points it was, a lot, both by they beat Richmond by 41, I think, and won against LaSalle by 30. So do the math there. That's a big 2 big home wins for them after the St. Louis loss. So stopping VCU, or at least slowing them, will be a challenge. And remember, VCU, was up big against Dayton at the arena last March. So they're certainly capable of playing well at the arena.
Yeah, one player that's kind of also been talked about here lately was Zed Key. They mentioned him on the broadcast, the injuries he's dealt with and things of that nature this year, scoring double figures pretty consistently at the beginning of the year. And now his role's kind of diminished a bit as they've adjusted to life without him or with him at a limited capacity. Is there a path for him to kind of get back to what he was doing at the beginning of the year? Or do you think they've fully adjusted to him kind of being a background player at this point?
I don't know what happened to Zed, but you're right. He was putting up big numbers, close to double at times in November and early December. And since mid-December, he's fallen off. He did hurt his back at one point. I don't know if that's affected him. He missed one game because of that. And at that point, when they were struggling, they lost those 3 straight games. They put the freshman Amial Latong into the starting lineup. He's a 7'1" freshman from France. And he's played really well, definitely one of the top freshmen in the league. And if he sticks around at Dayton, you can see him having a great career. Of course, these days, who knows if he will stick around. But, he's getting all the minutes that Zed was getting early in the season. And when Zed has gotten in, he hasn't been as effective. He's still a danger on those pick and roll lobs, and done a good job of getting to the line at times. He can block a few shots here and there, but in general, just not producing like he has. And I don't know. It's been a while since he has, so we'll see if his production comes back at all.
Have to selfishly ask about this guy because I'm a Robert Morris guy, and we had this player for a little while. Enoch Cheeks didn't have a great game the other night, but what's he mean to this team's offensive production here down the stretch?
Yeah, when Dayton is playing its best, he's playing his best. He had a great start to the season, was probably their best player in the Maui Invitational, probably their MVP in non-conference, but then he went into a little slump, or long slump, really. In those 3 games they lost to George Washington, UMass, and George Mason. He wasn't producing at all and just could not buy a basket from 3-point range, but responded with several good games in a row and has been more consistent lately. He didn't shoot well the other night, but nobody did. So there's a good chance he bounces back against VCU, but a very dynamic, talented player.
Yeah, we've kind of alluded to the depth of this team a little bit. I'm not sure. I think 5 maybe players got the double digits on Tuesday. Can't remember if that's totally accurate or not, but
3 with 13, 2 with 10.
Depth on this team seems to be pretty strong. How do you think that'll help them in the long run if they do, as you said, you're not expecting them to win the A10 by any stretch, but, make an A10 tournament run, or if they do squeeze into March Madness somehow, how is the depth of this team in terms of stacking up to others?
It's okay at times. With Malachi out, their depth really hurts. The first 7 are pretty solid. Down the bench, they're struggling to get production from some of those guys. Jacob Connor is a guy who, he doesn't put up big numbers for sure. Anthony likes his play and contributions at times. I mean, he doesn't have to put up big numbers, but he needs some defense and rebounding from him. Jayon Simon is a guy who was a redshirt freshman, didn't play at all last year. He's, playing maybe 5 to 7 minutes a game. And he can contribute at times, but he's, definitely not somebody who will ever put up big numbers this season. Isaac Jack was, a key player last season, is barely seeing the court these days. They've got a freshman named Hamad Muser from Qatar, Middle East, who is a real work in progress and hasn't been able to show a whole lot this season, but still getting a few minutes here and there. He's going to need some time to get used to the college game. Maybe next year or the year after that, he could contribute if he sticks around. So I don't know if the bench is as deep as people thought it was at the beginning of the season, but that's typically how it goes. Coaches are going to lean on the experienced guys this time of year, and they do have a lot of experienced guys.
For sure. So you kind of mentioned, it sounds like you're kind of hopeful for how they close out this regular season, even with those 2 VCU matchups. Is there any potential stretch or even just a single game that you think might throw this team off, maybe hitting kind of bombshell and wait here that might throw them for a loop when they reach that point?
I think if they win tonight, they're probably not going to lose again at home this season, but there's some really challenging road games, all of which they could lose. Even Fordham, you got to be careful with that game. If Fordham just beat Rhode Island at the Rose Hill last night, and Dayton goes to Fordham next week. Dayton has only lost to Fordham once in the last 20 years, I think, but still, it's a dangerous game. Playing at Rhode Island will be tough. Dayton got beat pretty good there by a poor Rhode Island team 2 years ago. Loyola Chicago, Dayton lost there last year. They're going to want to win that game after losing at the buzzer here at Dayton a couple weeks ago. And then, as we said, closing at VCU, that's a tough one. Even though Dayton has won a couple of times there in recent years, going there on senior night, VCU maybe a chance to play for a conference title that night. We'll see how it goes. A lot of tough games for Dayton the rest of the way, and that's why their at-large hopes are so slim at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, appreciate you taking some time to chat with me this afternoon, and hope they give you some fun basketball to watch here for the ending portion of this regular season.
Oh, it's always interesting. No matter what, there's always some good stories. So I'll enjoy the last month or 6-7 weeks, however much time we got left. It's always a fun ride.
Sounds good. Thank you, David.
Yep, thank you.
And another huge shout out to David for joining us here on Stranded in the Paint on our return episode after a couple years. It's been a lot of fun. Been watching college basketball, obviously, that entire time. Maybe not as much as I would have liked to, but we are back now, and we're excited to be diving in each and every week with you here as we're now in February. March Madness not too far away. It felt like January really dragged as a whole, but right now we're back and getting into that really exciting time of the year where the Super Bowl is about to be over and a lot of eyes start turning to the college game, and it's a great brand of basketball no matter where you watch. So much fun is college basketball. So many storylines, so many great players, especially this year. And we're excited to be going along with you, and hopefully you join us for the ride as we break all of that down here over the next couple months. But my name's Nick Hedrick. Excited, if I haven't said that enough already, excited to be with you. And we hope you do, in fact, join us next week. We're going to have another special one. Might go a little bit bigger in terms of conference. Maybe one on the Atlantic coast even. We'll see you then. Take care of yourselves.